Hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting our research work on decoys in cybersecurity, an exploratory study to test effectiveness of two-sided deception. So this work has been done at Carnegie Mellon along with my colleagues. And this research is sponsored by Army Research Lab and Muri Grant. Cyber deception is a defense technique that strategically manipulates information to create confusion among attackers. So one of the deception technique is decoying strategy, where defenders create fake objects to lure attackers in order to monitor their behavior in the network and mitigate attacks. Example of decoys is Honeypot. Honeypot is a fake system which looks like a real system and have a lot of value for attackers, given that it has some kind of sensitive info. It displays to have sensitive information or easy to exploit vulnerabilities, but it has no true value to the users. So the effectiveness of honeypots depends on many things, and it's limited because of factors such as use of default configuration of honeypots. Given that a lot of honeypots are open source and they are also available to attackers, so attackers are aware of the default configurations. If such honeypots are deployed in your network, it's of no use and it might create trouble for other systems as well. Then it is also important how honeypots are allocated in the network and how many honeypots do you need in the network. So there are a lot of factors which impact the effectiveness of honeypots. In this paper, we are mainly focusing on the features of honeypot. So in the feature domain, Mia et al. 2020 proposed a solution that proposed that identify all the modifiable and configuration features of honeypot as well as on real node and create confusion by modifying these features not only for honeypots but also for real nodes. However, this technique has been tested only in simulation, not with human attackers. So in this study, we are modifying honeypot features of honeypot and real nodes and evaluate the performance using human experiments. To do so, what we did, we identified features that includes operating system, ports and services, exploit information, exploit success rate, whether you will, when you will launch an attack, whether it will be successful or not. Then the link latency, whether the honeypot or real node is deployed on a virtual machine or physical machine, how many running processes are there, and what's the file system, how many folders do you have. So we surveyed few honeypots and find out what's the default configuration on majority of honeypots. So what we found, most of them have obsolete operating system. They have specific ports dedicated for honeypots. And then most of the exploits are obsolete in the sense they are old exploits whose attack like success rate is 100%. Link latency is high and mostly honeypots are deployed on virtual machines. They have less number of processes and mostly the folders are either empty or you will not have access. So we gathered these features from default honeypots, and then we also surveyed some real machine and gathered features. For example, we have on real machines mostly up-to-date normal ports. Exploits are mostly patched and success rate is low, and link latency is low, and there are chances that machines are deployed on physical machines, more number of processes because they are active, and then there would be less access denied or empty folders. So in this, what we did, we conceal these honeypot features to make them look like real, and we conceal features of real node to make them look like honeypot. So the concealed real features resembles with default ones, and the concealed honeypot features resemble with the default real. We created 3 experimental conditions. One is the default condition where both honeypot and real are default. Then we created one-sided deception, that is concealed honeypot only, where default real is used. And then we have two-sided deception where concealed honeypot as well concealed real nodes are being used. So we conduct this experiment using a testbed called HackIT that allows to deploy deception and conduct human in the loop experiment. So we have a network of 40 nodes, 20 are real nodes and 20 are honeypots. Honeypots are randomly allocated in the network. And what we did, we hired participants using a cybersecurity knowledge test, and if they qualified the test with 70% or more, they were allowed to participate in the further study. And we end up having 48 participants, which were randomly distributed to these three conditions: default honeypot, default concealed honeypot, and concealed honeypot real. So these participants aged between 18 to 62, mean age is 33 years, and they were mostly engineering students having computer science and cybersecurity background. But again, those were not the actual penetration testers or practitioners in the industry. And the goal for attackers in this task was to fetch pin.txt, which was located on each system. And if they fetch that file from honeypot, they will lose minus 100 points. And if they fetch that from regular nodes, they will gain 100 points. And participants were provided 60 minutes. They were paid $12 base payment, and they could earn up to $10 of bonus. So after providing the informed consent reading instructions, the main study starts. And in this study, like, we provided them a set of commands. So first step is like gather information about the network and the node which you are interested in. So they could scan and find out how many systems they have in for exploitation. And then they could use nmap command to know what port, services, operating system, and exploits are there on particular system. They could also use RTT flag along with nmap command to know the link latency. And we also provided an option, an estimate of whether a system is honeypot or not, using checkhs command on a particular system. And then if they want to know more about any exploit on a system, they could use info exploit command. And if they are satisfied with the information gathered, they could attack. Otherwise, they can scan again. Once they decided to attack, they could launch it using use exploit, then exploit name and system number. If they are successful, then they will be able to have access of a system. If not, given the success rate is probabilistic, they can try again. So once they have access to system, their task was to steal pin.txt file. For that, they have couple of folders which they can traverse, list through ls command and traverse through cd command. And they can also check what processes are running using ps command. And they can also check whether it's a virtual machine or real machine using check vm command. So once they found the file and they are sure that they want to fetch a file, they could use scp command to fetch the file on their IP address. So if they fetch it from honeypot, they will lose 100 points. If they fetch it from real, they will gain 100 points. And based on that, they will have access to more nodes. If they want to explore neighbors of that particular node, they can go through the process again. Otherwise, they can log out and end the task. And if they decide not to fetch the file or somehow they don't find the file, they can log out. And at this point, they are not given a penalty of extra points. So they were given 30 points for successful exploit and minus 30 if they have end up exploiting honeypot. And if there are more systems to exploit, they can of course go and do the same process again. So what we observed in our task that participants exploited similar number of systems in all three conditions. Median was around 12 systems in default and concealed honeypot and 13 in concealed honeypot real nodes. And then we also looked at how to measure the success of deception. One idea is to look at the proportion of honeypots. What we observed that a proportion of honeypots was higher in the concealed condition. So if we look at the concealed honeypot, that was higher than default condition, and similarly concealed honeypot real was higher than the default condition. So we are able to get more honeypot attacks by feature manipulation. However, we did not observe any difference between these two conditions, one-sided and two-sided deception condition. Then we also looked at the second phase, which is a fetching of file, the data exfiltration phase, and we again observe that the default condition has low data exfiltration rate on honeypots compared to other two conditions. So the concealed honeypot was significantly higher compared to the default, but there was no difference between concealed honeypot and concealed honeypot real conditions. And then we also looked at the score which participants gain at the end of the game. And the least score was on concealed honeypot condition, which is of course a resultant of because there were more data exfiltration in the concealed condition. That's why we have the lowest score for concealed honeypot condition. Another factor we looked at how much time they spent on real versus honeypot nodes, and we divided this into two phases, exploration and data exfiltration phase. And when we looked at all the attacks they have done in the network, we found that there is no difference between the real attacks or honeypot attacks in these two phases. Then we also looked at first two attacks just to make sure how they started. And we observed in the exploitation phase, default condition, participants spent more time on honeypots compared to real nodes. However, that was not the case in other two conditions. And then when we looked at data exfiltration phase, we observed that participants spent more time on real nodes in concealed honeypot condition and more time on real honeypot nodes in concealed honeypot real condition. So in these two conditions, what we observed that they are spending more time on real looking configuration rather than honeypot looking configuration. And to know how they are using these features to make their decisions, we also collected post-survey responses from participants. I'm presenting a few. So what we looked at is we asked them how did you decide which target to attack and which factors did they use. So participants mentioned that operating disclosure date of exploit and checkhs command were the most used features for making attack decision. And then followed by we also asked what affected their decision to fetch pin.txt file, the data exfiltration step. And participants mentioned that, again, the disclosure date and checkhs command were very useful for them. And then they also looked at features such as empty directories, access denied, and check VM. Whether the machine is virtual or physical, those indicators they used for making the decisions. So we again asked a question that if they have successfully exploited a system, have they given up on fetching pin.txt, and if so, what was the reason? Most of participants mentioned that they could not find out where the pin.txt file is. This could be due to the time constraint, or there are number of empty folders which they gave up maybe. So that could be the reason why they could not locate pin.txt file. So we found in our experiment that feature manipulation on real and honeypot is effective in gaining more honeypot and data exfiltration attacks against human attackers. But we did not observe any significant difference in one-sided and two-sided deception. This could be due to small sample size. Participants were not penetration testing, so maybe our feature manipulation doesn't make sense to our sample, or there could be so the feature manipulation is maybe it's not optimal, or they may have limited time available for attacking or exploring the system. But what we have learned in our experiment that participants used disclosure date and honeypot score, which influence their exploitation decision. And we also observed that they, at the data exfiltration stage, participants use more access denied empty folders, whether the machine is physical or virtual. Those features were important for them. In future, we will like to address some of the issues with our experiment design. We would also like to know how costly it is for defenders to modify these features, and evaluate if we involve cost manipulation, how it will impact the overall effectiveness of two-sided deception. And we would like to conduct experiments with experts to understand more plausible feature manipulation, and to understand more about the human decision-making processes. We would like to develop cognitive model of human behavior. Thank you.